You already pressed the button. Okay.
All right.
Knock him dead.
Yeah. My name's Lara. I'm an alcoholic. And as Alex said, I'm going to try not to screw this thing up. Or he used another expletive, but I was told I wasn't supposed to do that from the podium, so I won't. I'll try to be good. Well, I've already, I've already cried, so there may be some tears tonight because I'm completely overwhelmed with gratitude. And when I was new in sobriety, when people would say they were grateful, I mean, it just sort of went in one ear and out the other. I really didn't understand why anybody would be grateful that they had to sit in these rooms, or I just didn't get it. Like, why would you be grateful that you're an alcoholic and can never drink again? I mean, like, that was something that was unfathomable to me when I first got here. But I am completely grateful. My sobriety date is August 19th, 1986. I have a sponsor. My sponsor doesn't have a sponsor because they all die. So she has somebody she's accountable to, and that's what's important about this, and that's what we get to do in Alcoholics Anonymous is find people who we can be accountable to and accountable with. Okay, so I just want to thank everybody for enduring this amazing heat, especially for anybody who was here at the quarterly knowing how hot it was in here and you decided to come back. So thank you. I'm gonna get centered. So my story is, and this is a story I want to be clear about another success story so far that of Alcoholics Anonymous. This will have some details about my life, but this really is a story about Alcoholics Anonymous and the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want to be super clear about that. I grew up in an alcoholic house. I was an only child, 2 alcoholic parents. Their relationship was rocky at best. It didn't last very long. My dad and mom got divorced when I was about 6. And I was raised by a single mother who was addicted to drugs, alcohol, and relationships. And so there was a lot of activity in our house. We'll put it that way. And my dad was an alcoholic, and he wasn't super involved in my life. But my dad is now sober, 42 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have a relationship today, which I'm very grateful for. And I'll tell you more about me and my mom. But I started drinking. First of all, I thought that I would never use. I never wanted to use drugs or alcohol because I was raised in it. I never wanted to do it, and I swore I never would. Something happened about the age 11 that changed my mind. I don't know what it was exactly, but somehow I just wanted to find out what all the excitement was about. And I drank for the first time at 11. It was at a party at my house, and I arranged it. I had this whole cool room in the basement of this house that my mom was married her 3rd husband. The cocaine dealer who happened to have a lot of money. So our house was big, and I had a basement bedroom all to myself. I snuck everybody in, and we had a party. They stole their parents' alcohol, and it was on. And it really was a very classic, very classic. I drank, and I was like, oh, this is what all the fuss is about, right? Like, and it's just so common. It's just, I'm a garden variety drunk. I didn't feel comfortable in my skin, right? I felt less than, I felt awkward. I I was weird, you know, and the kids at school let me know that I just how weird I was, and when I drank, I was not weird. I quickly became disgustingly drunk and was crawling on the floor and wanting to kiss people's toes, and then I threw up everywhere and passed out. It was great, right? But so that's like how that's how I drank, and it didn't get any better after that. I mean, like that's just how it was. Uh, Except that I was so sick the next day. I laid on the picnic table. It was in the summer. I laid on the picnic table. I could not move. I had poisoned myself. I was super sick, and I thought, okay, that was great, but I don't know if I ever want to do that again, because I am really sick, and so just like a great alcoholic home, there was outside issues scattered around also, and so I decided, well, I'd try the next thing in line, and that quickly became my best friend, and I would indulge in marijuana every chance I could get, which was pretty much all day, every day. Um, but then I also realized shortly into my drinking career and using career that if I used certain drugs, I could drink more and I wouldn't get sick, and it was it was great. So that's pretty much my story. Is that when I found oblivion for the first time, I really wanted oblivion every chance I could get after that. My mom, uh, my mom tried to get sober a couple times and relapsed. Went to treatment. Didn't quite get sober. My life was, you know, um, spinning out of control. I was a, you know, my mom. The only thing that saved me, I think, is that my mom didn't mind if I used drugs or drank at the house. She actually preferred that I did it at the house, so she knew where I was. Right? The first time I tried to smoke pot, I stole some, and me and my friend went out into the playhouse, and I'm smoking some pot, and I see my mom come down the stairs, and I'm like, oh shit, right? And I'm so, I thought I didn't want to get caught, and she comes out and she opens the door, and a plume of smoke comes out. She's like, what are you doing? And I said, nothing, nothing. I know you're smoking pot. Just go inside and do it. I'm like, oh, okay. And so that was pretty much it. And then me and my mom, it didn't take very long for me and my mom to start using and drinking together. And I won't go into too many details, but I saw stuff that teenagers shouldn't see. I saw stuff as a child that kids shouldn't see. Um, I spent my fair share of time in the car, in the parking lot of the bar. Whatever. It is what it is. But where we ended up was we ended up homeless. Essentially, we actually had enough money to be in a motel. It was called the Chinook Motel. It was on Empire Way. If anybody remembers Martin Luther King, before it was called Martin Luther King, it was called Empire Way, and it went all the way down into Renton, and right on up by the corner of the 7-Eleven, there was a motel called Chinook Motel, and that's where we were staying. And we were, dealing, doing our stuff to get enough money to pay for the night. And, uh, me and my married boyfriend, I'm not proud of that, but that's just what happens, right? Like, happened to me at the end of my drinking. And my mom and her boyfriend, and we were in that motel because well, it doesn't matter, man. It was crazy. It was crazy. We stole some horses. They stole our pot. We were fleeing for our lives because my mom was dating a black man, and our neighbors were inbred Illinois weirdos that threatened our lives for that. And so we fled, and we're living in the motel. And it wasn't the first time that I tried to get sober. I went to NA for the first time when I was 15, stayed sober for about 7 months. And that's a whole nother story, but ended up in the hospital paralyzed and got addicted to morphine. And when I got out of the hospital, um, it was on. So I just started using and drinking again. But when we made it back this time, both me and my mom got sober on the same day. It was my mom's 40th birthday, August 19th, 1986. And we walked into the South End Alano Lounge. It was a 10 a.m. Saturday morning meeting, and and I can remember a couple people there, but I just remember crying, and like I just knew that that was it. I was home, or I was. I just knew that I had surrendered. I didn't know how long it was going to last, but I knew I was surrendered that moment in time, and I needed to be sober. And I haven't had a drink or a drug since. And so I was 17 years old that day on August 19th, 1986. And so, like a lot of people I know that got sober young, I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And growing up in Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't look that great sometimes. Like I've done some really stupid shit in my sobriety, because sometimes people, do stupid stuff in their teens and 20s. But what ended up happening to me is I ended up understanding early on what it meant to get sober. And that was, I was willing to go to any lengths. And what that meant for me is that I went to 2 and 3 meetings a day. And it took me a little bit, but I eventually got a sponsor. I was 6 months sober when I asked Cherie to be my sponsor. I don't recommend waiting 6 months. I just thought I could do it on my own because I'm tough like that. I'm an only child, and I kind of thought that I could do anything myself. Thanks anyway. But I kind of used the meetings as my sponsor, right? Like I went to a lot of meetings. And I would go to meeting and meeting and meeting, hopping, and I just went to meetings all over the place. I went to the old Fremont when I first got sober, when it was at its original place. We went all over. They had the Tacoma Club down in Tacoma. They had the Edlin. They had the Wanda's Club 4. They had, the Butt Hut. They had, all those places. And I just was sober and crazy and young. And it was great. I had a group of people that sobered up, young kids at Serenity Hall that were sober, and I clung to them, and we hung out. And I did start working steps, to the best of my crazy young ability, right? And I did get a sponsor, and she introduced me to Joe and Charlie Big Book tapes, and that's how I was first introduced to the Big Book in a way that became that I could understand. Up to that point, I would read because they told me read the book, and I would be like, okay, and I would read it, and I would, literally three paragraphs in, and I'm asleep. Right? Like it was not, I was like, I know they're telling me that this means something, but I don't know what it means. And so Cherie introduced me to the Joe and Charlie Big Book tapes, which helped me to start to comprehend what the book was talking about. And I did, I worked some steps to the best of my ability. I made amends to the best of my ability. I remember I tried to make amends to this guy who I'd had I don't know about anybody here, but one of the one of the promises came true for me immediately upon my very first day of sobriety. We will gain interest in our fellows. That was immediate. I did not have to wait until the halfway through step 9 for that one. And so, that being said, I had some amends to make when I got to step 9, and one of these guys would come to Serenity Hall, and I was like, okay, I got to make amends to that guy. So in the middle of a meeting, right, I go sit down next to him, and I'm like sideline, and I'm like, hey, I just want to tell you I'm sorry, right in the meeting, and he he was sober a couple years longer than I was, and which tells you how sober he was, because I think I only had like 30 days or something. But when we had, yeah. Anyway, uh, so he's like, so after the meeting, he's like, I'll talk to you after the meeting. And so after the meeting, he's like, that's not how you make amends. So he says, come on, I'll tell you how to make amends. And makes me get in his Volkswagen Bug, and he, drives me around and tells me how my actions affected him. And I was like, Jesus, okay. So anyway, it was, I've learned a lot. I've made amends wrong. I've worked the steps to the best of my ability. I feel like even though I've made some mistakes, uh, haven't done it like perfect or whatever. I have managed to stay sober, and I have done it to the very best of my ability. And if nothing else, you're not going to call me a slacker in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have. Um, I feel like I've worked my ass off in sobriety, and but I just don't stop moving. I just can't stop moving. I feel like they say people rest on their laurels, but I don't feel like I do that very much. Knock on wood. I mean, knock on wood. Anyway, you okay, honey? Okay. Getting them all choked up. Anyway, so I'm like sober already, and I got a half hour left. But that's good, because really I drank for 6 years, right? They talk about in the big book how women are often gone beyond recall in a few short years. That's my experience. As a young person, I somehow I was blessed with the desire to get sober. It talks about how young people, a lot of them aren't, they're not ready because of the peculiar mental twist that's already acquired. They just aren't interested, you know? And I want to think, I don't even know. I just know that when I got here, I related. I sat in a room with a bunch of what appeared to be old people, but I related to their stories. And I did hear people say, "Oh, I spilled more than you drank." That that was said to me. Not a whole bunch, but it was said, And so I'm going to tell you, I ended up getting married at 3 years sober. I hooked up with somebody. This poor guy, he was like 90 days sober. I had 3 years, and met him at Fremont Hall, which is I highly recommend getting a husband out of Fremont Hall if you can. But what ended up happening is we got introduced to Drunks or Us, and a way of going through the book, a big book workshop way of going through the book that was brought up from California, and I got to go through that workshop and get introduced to the book line by line, page by page. If we didn't know a word, we looked it up. Then the book really came alive for me, right? And this is when I realized that that I'm a real alcoholic, right? I mean, I knew I was an alcoholic, but I didn't really understand why. I thought it was just because my mom and dad were alcoholics, and the book tells me exactly why I'm an alcoholic, right? And I knew that I had a spiritual malady, right? Because I can relate to anybody with a spiritual malady, right? I was raised in an alcoholic home, right? Isn't that my problem? I was raised, my dad was never around. Isn't that my problem? Uh, I had some, questionable shit happen to me in my childhood. Isn't that my problem? It's like, lots of people had that, right? Lots of people have stuff like that. My issue is that I cannot drink without developing a phenomenon of craving. And then I cannot stay sober without the insanity of the first drink creeping into my mind, making it seem okay to take a drink. That's why I'm here. That's why I qualify for Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not because of the stuff that happened to me as a child. That's an unfortunate situation, but I can do, the 12 steps has freed me from those. That's why we have so many 12-step programs, right? Because it's a recipe for freedom from our spiritual malady. And so, but what I don't ever want to forget is what my real problem is, and that is that I'm an alcoholic. And, uh, and that was great because I was able to feel like I belonged in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. That all of those barriers, the cultural barriers, the gender barriers, the societal barriers drop away. We're all alcoholics. We all have one thing in common, right? And then we have all these other things, right? But we have one thing in common, and that's that we're an alcoholic. And the great news is that we have a common solution on which we can absolutely agree for the most part, right? And so I really liked that experience of the first step because it took away all my uniqueness, right? Um, and it just made me another member, another garden variety drunk, another member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's who stands here today. I'm just another member of Alcoholics Anonymous that has found freedom from my from the insanity that precedes the first drink. What that looked like for me was, very emotional. Very emotional. I would say my first higher power was as a child and well into sobriety was my emotional nature. My emotional nature was very important to me. And it was very important to me that I was validated in my emotions. If you did not validate me or I did not perceive that you validated me, you were on my list to talk to my therapist about. And then she would, of course, reassure me that I was valid. And so I handed her my $75 and felt better when I walked out of there. But and so I've made lots and lots of decisions based on how I felt in sobriety and well into my sobriety. Um, um, so I don't want to get sidetracked. Me and that husband from Fremont Hall lasted about 7.5 years. We both stayed sober. He has recently died sober. I'm still sober. And we had a child who never had to see either of her parents drink. And, a marriage out of Fremont Hall lasting 7 years is kind of a success story, if you ask me. But again, we were introduced to the workshops, and I was introduced to working the steps in a way that has revolutionized my way of thinking. And I'll just be forever grateful. Back in the Drunks R Us when it first started, we had Steve and Nancy and Jeffrey and Daniel, and it was just such an awesome time. Things were so exciting. It was just amazing, I think people were on fire, and it was really wonderful to be a part of that. And because of that process, I have a process, and because of some of the things that Sally has shown me by taking me through the work, and that Austri has shown me by taking me through the work. Can you believe it? Like, I am so lucky to have had to have and have had these women as sponsors. They're like uh, they're like beacons of light and hope in the program, and I've gotten to share. I get to share my life with them and my sobriety with them. I'm so humbled. But that's what we get to do. Like they, and then it passes, and then that's how it works, right? It's like one alcoholic working with another, and um, I'm just so grateful that I get to be that. I get to be that vessel for the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, and so the first step was paramount for me to help me to feel like I belonged in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I was a real alcoholic. I have the phenomenon of craving. I have the insanity that precedes the first drink. I qualify. And it didn't matter that I was only 17, and it didn't matter that I didn't lose a marriage and a house and my kids, and because I didn't have any of that stuff to lose. I was broken when I got here. I had nothing. I had no soul. I had no self-esteem. I had a bunch of shame for the ways that I had acted, a bunch of shame from uh, all kinds of stuff, and uh, so I needed this program when I got here, and somehow I also wanted it. And then step two, come to believe in a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I struggled for so long, there's a part in the book where it talks about, to the precise extent that you lost your power of choice to drink, to that exact same extent you need to have a spiritual experience in order to recover from alcoholism. And I thought, God, I was so young, and that maybe a higher power really was for those people that were, were down and out and lost everything, that maybe I could get away with not believing in a power greater than myself to the extent that these really sick people like Stephen needed to. And I struggled with the idea of a power greater than myself and self-will for a very long time. Like I said, my emotional nature was my higher power, and I've made a lot of decisions based on how I felt, consulting my feelings, and I hurt a lot of people in sobriety because of that, and myself, and so, but it is what it is. I am who I am, and it's taken what it's taken, and it doesn't have to be shameful. It's just an experience that I can draw on now and I can share with other people. Um, and I've done the third step a number of times. I've done the third step on my knees. I've done the third step uh, maybe in my therapist's office. I've done the third step um, on Zoom with people. I've done the third step in all kinds of different ways. But the one thing about the third step is that that I really believe wholeheartedly is that decision doesn't mean anything unless I get up and start writing my fourth step immediately, and that's what I've done. Ever since it was shown to me to do it that way, that's what I did. That's what I do, and so because I was, that decision doesn't mean anything until I follow through with the rest of the steps. The action of the rest of the steps is the action of step three. Up until that point, it's just a good intention, right? And we all know what good intentions get you. And so in the fourth step, I get to see, it's really fun to write down who and what I'm mad at and why and what it affected. And that's, there's some kind of, relief in that a little bit. And then you get to the fourth column where you look at my part and I'm like, I don't know, man. Is this real? Like, especially the stuff that, happened as a child. Like, where do you see, where's your part in that? Where's my part in that? Or circumstances that, I've gotten to listen to people's fifth steps where, full on, like victims of unfortunate circumstances, and And I get to see that, you know, I get to see that it's my choice to hold on to that. And that, so I'll use an example. My dad, right? He was an alcoholic. He left me and my mom when I was young and never was around. And my mom was always quick, cold-hearted son of a bitch is how he was referred to in my house. And um, um, so he always was on my, he was on my four steps, right? Especially the first few, right? And um, when it was time for me to make amends to my father, um, he was sober in AA by this time. He hadn't made amends to me yet, which was a point of contention, right? But but I was told that it doesn't matter, that you need to go make amends to your father, and you need to make amends to your father for not being the kind of daughter that you wanted to be because of your resentment towards him, and that you wanted to set him, you wanted to forgive him, and that you were selfish and dishonest with yourself about it. And so I did. That's exactly what I did. And then you need to ask how that affected him, and you need to ask how you can make it right. And so that's what I did. I made an appointment. It was a lunch date with my dad, and it was some restaurant up on Lake City Way. It was really, I don't even remember what it was. It was an old restaurant, but I did that. I made amends to my dad, and it was then that, and the first time I saw my dad cry, and he ended up making amends to me, and years of suffering and hatred and shame and guilt melted away for both of us in that moment, and we were both set free. So that is what these 12 steps can do, right? They can set us free from our past. And not only can they set us free, but they can set other people free. That is what I believe about, and my experience with making amends is that it's not about me. I mean, sure, I need to do it in order to get clean. I need to do it in order to clean my side of the street. I need to do it to experience some freedom, and I need to do it in order to stay sober. But it's really for the other person too, right? Like I was able to set my dad free from his guilt of being a shitty dad, and being an alcoholic father, and um, and that is as clear of an example as I have about how these 12 steps can set somebody free from their past. And um, I've made amends to my mom. My mom ended up, she stayed sober. She never drank, but she did suffer from chronic pain, and was on pain medication, and had a really, really hard time feeling like she was sober, and stopped going to meetings. Um, but we'd always get coins, and I'd always give her a coin, and um, she was. It wasn't really until I became a parent myself that I understood what it meant, or how hard it is to be a parent, uh, and especially one that is suffering so with drug and alcohol addiction, and addiction to relationships. She was married 5 times before it was over, and then with her last boyfriend for 20 years. So she was busy. I told her she had a rodeo heart, because that's just how it felt to me. She was one of the greatest humans on the face of the planet. And so that's also something that I'm able to say, like I could hold on to all the shit, that I experienced as a child, but I know now that yes, she did the best she could, but quite honestly, she did better than most in a lot of ways. And and I miss her every day. Um, she died in 2020. Um, so I only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to talk about, um, you know, during COVID, I really got introduced to Step 11 in a new way because I had a bunch of time. I had a bunch of time on my hands, and it was actually awesome. You know, I mean, it was crazy. COVID changed everything about my perception of everything, um, which has been interesting. But what it did do, as far as my program, is that it gave me the time to meditate, and I meditated every day. And I had done that up until COVID hit. I would meditate. It was hard, you know. It's hard to get quiet. It's hard to stop the stuff, you know, the stuff, as we all know. I would, you know, I would do active meditation. That's what I'd call it: gardening, doing the dishes, martial arts. I was involved in martial arts for a while. I would, you know, and that's all good. I think it's just fine. It's just what it is. Everybody gets their peace and their connection with a power greater than themselves in whatever way they get that. You know, nature is awesome. I get it there. It's just, you know, I've had lots of experiences in sobriety that brought me closer to my higher power. But COVID really kind of started nailing down, like right about March when things started shutting down. I started attending this Facing Your Fears meditation meeting every morning, and we'd meditate, and every morning for months. And then my mom died, and then I had been working here about 6 months at that time, and I or about 8 months at that time, and so I was surrounded by Alcoholics Anonymous. Uh, I was closer to my higher power than I'd ever been in my sobriety, and I was surrounded by Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know if I could, what would have happened had I not had that cocktail of Alcoholics Anonymous and my higher power, how I would have dealt with my mom dying. Um, I just don't know. There's no way to know. But so I was surrounded, and Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, kept me sober. The people here kept me sober. Being of service in Alcoholics Anonymous kept me sober. Uh, you know, I was told when I first got sober to go to meetings, go to meetings, go to meetings, because when the tough times come, and they will come, because that's life, you'll know what to do. Go to a meeting, call your sponsor, right? Be in the middle so you don't fall off the edge, right? Be in the caboose, not on the caboose, right? Had to bring in that. But uh, that was really an amazing, you know, testament to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I do work here. I'm one of the special workers. I get that opportunity. I don't know that it's super important to talk about that, except that it wasn't really until I started working here that I really, I mean, I've always loved intergroup, and my home groups answered phones here and, uh, and that sort of thing. But I didn't really understand how integral intergroup is to Alcoholics Anonymous in the Seattle area. Like, it's amazing to me. And I just have so much gratitude and just so humbled by the decades of service that have gone into Seattle Intergroup before I was here, because it was all in place. I just have to make sure the bills are paid, and then everything else takes care of itself. Really, I mean, it's so amazing and then that all these people come and be of service, and we get to you know, people call in asking for help, and we have a 12-step list, and we get to go down the 12-step list, and you know, people get to answer the phone and say, yes, I will do that. Yes, I'll call that person. Yes, I will be of service. I have been introduced at Seattle Intergroup to more yes people than I've ever met in my life. And that's what it takes to stay sober, is to be a yes person, right? You got to be a yes person, man. And uh, that's just as simple as I know how to. Like, if they ask you to make coffee, your answer needs to be yes. Uh, ask you to set up, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Because I know because it's my experience that's how I stay sober. Um, and I can't get so cocky that I think, oh, I don't need to do that today. I don't need to go to that meeting today. I'm not, it's hot in this room, right? Like, I mean, I knew I had to speak tonight. My sponsor that wouldn't have been good. Yeah, I don't call in sick to Austri. That doesn't work so well. um, uh, but I get to say yes today, and I get to see the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous every day that I come into work, and every day that you know, just every day. And so that is the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you get into the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, you really start to understand what a miracle this program is, and how all these serendipitous events, how crazy, right? And then it's just no, I can't question it anymore. I can't question uh, the existence of a power greater than all of us. Um, and how amazing, and then, there's strife. Sometimes there's strife. Sometimes there's, the fellowship wants to, rah, and, people having problems with GSO, right now. But when you read the history, it's always been that way. It seems like the fellowship's always had a problem with what Bill was doing, or whatever, it's just kind of always been that way. So, bunch of ungrateful drunks, right? We special workers get the job of trying to make a bunch of restless, irritable, discontent people happy. And, but that's not even possible. So I gave up on that. But it is interesting. It's an interesting job. And I'm super grateful that I get to, like, every year I get to go or be a part of a conference of other special workers. So we get to talk about, because we have a weird job. Nobody really, and there's just a handful of folks that have our job. And so I get lots of support from them, and I'm grateful for that. I don't know. I wanted to read this. I have 2 minutes, and this is what I'm going to read. All right. So I remember when I first got sober, I thought, man, there's no way that I'm going to be able to not drink for the rest of my life. Why? I'm 17. Why in the world would I want to stay sober for the rest of my life? I mean, I have such angst and turmoil in my soul. I can't imagine not having my medicine for the rest of my life, right? And of course, the old timers just smiled and said, one day at a time, right? You can do anything one day at a time. Or, like the Fremont people used to say, breathe in, breathe out, don't drink in between. If your ass falls off, we'll teach you a new way to sit and all that, right? So, and that's all true. That is absolutely 1000% true. So it says, we have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I'm willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? And looking around this room today, and all the people that have touched my life, this is what I have to say. Yes, there is a substitute, and is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last, and your most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus, we find the fellowship, and so will you. And that's exactly what I found in the fellowship and in Alcoholics Anonymous. So, thank you.